All right. All right. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? Oh no. Good morning. Good morning. So we are live for this stream, and I am hoping that everybody is able to see what they need to be seeing right now. If you could just jump on in and give us some feedback, that would be amazing. I'd love for you all to be able to do that. And I don't see my live video. Are we not live? We're not live. Are we live? I thought for sure we were. Oh, yeah, I guess we are. So can anybody jump in and let us know in the chat if you can actually see us here live? You do have to actually give StreamYard permission to be able to see the actual information. So if you can give us some thumbs up, let us know you're here. And if you're not, then you'll just have to catch us on the replay, because this is one heck of a topic that we need to discuss. And it seems like it's continually morphing, right? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nonstop.
So it tells me it's going, and maybe our guests just haven't jumped on yet, but it looks like we're here.
Perfect.
I promise you, I am going to get this together. He says his eyes are on here, but do you have your link? Yeah, I can see you share via text. I'm driving. Okay, I feel you, but we should be live in the event, and maybe we're not. I don't know how. I see us live right here on the. So I see us live right here on the event page. Are we not there? Let's go. We're here. Are we not here? I can't tell. So I promise y'all we're going to get this together at some point. Yeah, I have us on the video already, but that is happening now. Staring into event. No, don't do that. So I really can't tell, folks. I have started my live video, and from what I see on the screen, we actually are here, but maybe we're not. Okay, so yes, I have us live right now in Real Estate Rockstars, but lawsuit update. So maybe it came under a different stream. See if I can actually fix it, because I am getting a little perturbed at the moment. So let me edit this where we are. Huh?
I don't know that I see it there.
Well, you don't see it there either? Okay.
Hold on, I'm looking.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Very crazy. Well, we can try now. Let's see if it actually pops up. But geez, guys, technical difficulties will not allow us to not get this done. We are going to get this done. I set all this up in advance, you would think, but it didn't actually pop up. So let's see. How about now? Yeah, so I'm actually live in the group. I can't see that live. It looks like the event page is a no-go. So we are live actually in the group, streaming through as just onto the group alone. So we are actually live. So it looks like we did have one person that was viewing, got about 6 viewers. Give us a thumbs up that you are there. If you are a Facebook user and we want us to see your comments, we need you to give StreamYard permission to actually see your comments. So hi, thank you, Malisha, for letting us know that we are on and popping. So, gang, I tell you, the AI, the streaming, the whatever. But nonetheless, because we've already are 5 minutes behind, but that gave everybody a little time to come on to the page, then it's all good. If you want your comments seen, make sure you give StreamYard permission so that we can see your comments. I will be monitoring before on Facebook as well. So this morning, I keep wanting to say this afternoon. I'm sorry, gang. So this morning, we are talking about the NAR lawsuit that has pretty much rocked the industry, in my opinion. But I'm no attorney. So I decided to defer to Nicole, who is our resident title expert in the group, but also an attorney and actually has been tracking this for quite some time. So let's jump right in. Nicole, I'm going to pass it right on off to you.
Thank you very much, Marquita. Good to see everybody today. As she said, I've been tracking this since 2019, and it's a big deal. It's going to be a big deal. So the biggest thing to know right now is it is a big deal, and it's a big deal right now. We're not waiting for the appeal. Things will be changing probably starting in February when we finally get that court order and get some direction for what's going on. The primary focus you guys need to focus on is transparency and consumer protections, putting them first. So that's where this started. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how did we get here? We got here because we started back in 2019 when we didn't talk about commissions. Nobody discussed what they were getting paid. And somebody said, hey, how does a buyer's agent get paid? Funny enough that this is a lawsuit by the sellers against the listing agents, because I actually think that's only the first step. I think next you're going to start to see buyers' lawsuits continue to come up based on the entire argument that has been made for the sellers. So they started looking into how buyers and sellers agents get paid. You've got your listing agreement, right? And the listing agent is paid X%, and then part of that is co-opted or shared with the buyer's agent. And that's really the biggest problem that everybody has right now, is that they should be two separate fees, and they should be more transparent about who's getting paid what and what's coming from where. So if you remember all the way back to 2019, and this will be important later, we didn't used to publish the co-op offer of compensation in the listing. So there was an agent's printout of the listing and the client's printout of the listing. The client's printout of the listing didn't say how much the seller was going to pay towards the buyer's agent's commission. So imagine it this way, and I'm going to use numbers because we're talking about numbers, and there's no standard commission, but I'm going to use numbers. Okay. So if I am hiring a buyer's agent and that buyer's agent and I sign our agreement, right? I agree I'm going to pay her 6% or 3%. I'm going to pay her 3% to find me a home. Then we go and I find these 5 different properties that I want to see. The one I want is only offering 2.5% to my buyer's agent from the seller. Technically, I'm supposed to pay that other 0.5%, but I don't even know that until I'm under contract, and then I get my Alta settlement statement from the title company that has an extra 0.5% of the commission on there.
So when you say you mean me as the buyer figure out that it's only a 2.5 and I'm supposed to pay 3 because that's what I signed. So
right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, exactly. So and I know a lot of agents don't charge that other extra percent, but the lack of transparency is really where all of this started. The problem came in where how can a buyer know what they're on the hook for if none of this is published. They don't know how it's being either factored into the price of the home by the seller agreeing to pay for it, or is it something they can pay out of pocket? And really, where I think the bigger problem is going to come in is that the buyers don't get the choice right now. Right now, NAR has set it up so that co-op was required and it was already built in, which the buyer's argument is then if the seller is paying both commissions and they set those commissions, I don't get to negotiate with my buyer's agent as to what I really want to pay or what I'm willing to pay because it's already set and it's paid from somewhere else, but that's forced the price of the home to go up so that the seller can still net X amount of money. So that's where I think the bigger problem is heading. But what we started with was there's this requirement by NAR that you have to offer co-op compensation. So it's been around forever and everybody's just kind of said, this is how we've done it. This is, the standard practice in the industry. So NAR created this rule where you had to offer co-op compensation if you were going to put it in the MLS. Why does that work? If you're a realtor and you want access to the MLS and you want access to lockboxes, you have to be a member of NAR, or you did in 2019. The rules have since changed, but in order to do your job, you had to be a member of NAR. The local MLSs are owned by local associations, still tying into NAR. NAR says if you want to list a property in the MLS, you have to follow our co-op rule and offer something in terms of compensation. When this all started, it was X percent. You had to put in a percent of the price as an amount. Then they changed it to $1. Then they changed it to 0. But you had to do that. So what happened is the lawyers came and said, why is there a standard commission sort of across the board nationwide? Why is it somewhere between 5 and 6%, whether I'm buying a $100,000 house in Missouri or $1 million house in DC? This isn't making sense. And they're not wrong. It's weird. It's strange. So they pulled everybody who's involved in figuring out these commissions and said, okay, NAR and you brokerages, explain it to us. Tell us how you get paid and how this isn't collusion, how this isn't you guys agreeing to set a standard, right? When the lawsuit came out, everybody said conspiracy, no, that there weren't a bunch of, guys in a back room smoking cigars saying, let's agree we're all going to charge at least this much and we're going to require they pay other people. The point is that it happened through the practices that were done. So NAR requires this rule that you have to set some sort of co-op compensation. Okay. When we get to court and all these people are here and we're doing depositions and we're getting all the information, it comes out the brokerages actually turned on NAR and said, we don't like the co-op rule and we wish it would go away, but we can't make it go away because NAR controls the MLS and we can't put our properties in the MLS. We can't do our job without access to MLS and the lock boxes, which is contingent on us being a member of NAR and following all of their rules. So the brokerages called out NAR and said, we don't like this. Then NAR's argument was, well, yeah, we require the co-op compensation rule, but we don't set commissions. So it's not our fault that it's 3% across the board. It's the brokerage's fault. And, we talk a lot about how commissions are always negotiable. And I'm going to say right now, you really need to continue to follow that. Commissions are negotiable. And if your brokers have a minimum, you should probably be discussing it with them and figuring out what that's really for. Because here's the other thing, right? The lawsuits weren't against individual agents. And the ones that are against individual agents, I don't think are going to go well. When the seller is contracting for you to sell their house, they're contracting with the brokerage. Your broker has to sign off on that, which is where those minimum amounts that they're forcing their agents to charge comes into play. So we have the top 5, right? Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Redfin, Remax. Who am I missing? Somebody. Berkshire Hathaway.
Okay.
So they took those 5 and said, you guys make up, 90% of the business that's being done. it really only takes 5 people in charge to say, here's our minimum and create a standard commission. So that combined with the requirement to have a co-op and pay for the other side are the two things that came up, saying that they were all not actively saying this is what we're going to do to make sure we all get paid, but that by their behaviors, it created a standard that then made it not so negotiable and effectively increased the price to sellers and buyers. So that's how that occurred. In 2021, NAR finally came out and said we should publish the buyer's co-op offer of compensation so that they know what they're going to have to pay. It took 2 years. 2 years for them to
I remember you mentioned that they talked about it in 2019 and then it took 2 years. Do you think this was a good idea?
I think they should have done it immediately.
Okay.
I think, and some of the MLSs did do it immediately. And in fact, one of the defendants, Redfin, actually was one of the first ones to publish it as soon as it came to light that it was a problem. You couldn't see it on the MLS, but when their syndicate pulled from the MLS, it proactively published that offer of compensation, which was interesting.
Okay.
So they took that extra step, and it's, we've kind of just watched what's happened and what people have done. So that's how we got here. The other thing that's going on is we've got the DOJ hiding in the background. Okay. The DOJ has been involved with NAR once before in the 90s when the internet came out. And the DOJ is primarily focused on transparency and consumer protection. So in the 90s, they came out and said, you cannot have pocket listings that you refuse to put on the internet, because they felt like there was a separation between agents that were using the internet and agents that weren't. And agents that weren't using it were trying to create a disadvantage to the agents that were using the internet by saying, I'm not going to push this on there. I'm just going to keep it here. But really, that's a disadvantage to the consumer because they're getting less publication, less traffic. So there was a settlement. They agreed, they weren't going to allow for any sort of discrepancy there. And that's kind of where the MLS and NAR's involvement in that has kind of come from, in requiring things to be on there, requiring them to be published. The DOJ now is paying attention to the lawsuits, and they don't like the way that this is set up right now. The biggest thing that the DOJ wants is to separate the commissions. So let's take a look at how that's done, right? There's a couple of keywords that have been brought up during the lawsuits and the commissions cases and everything going on that we'll talk about. So it's weird that I, as a seller, pay for someone to represent my buyer. It's weird. And they've made all kinds of arguments for it that aren't really holding up. Okay. It's been done this way forever. This is how we do it. Buyers can't afford it. But those arguments are going away because now we can put $0 in the MLS. And when that's happening, your buyer's agents are still getting paid. They're just getting paid a different way. So the argument that this is how we've always done it didn't survive. That's not going to work. The other thing that's come up a lot is, well, buyers can't afford it. Okay. Well, this is where we've got to get really into the nitty gritty about talking about how buyers agents get paid, how all of this works, because that's why they're mad. Remember, that's why they're mad. They didn't understand how all of this worked. And now they're really fleshing it out and saying, well, that's not really fair. So,
okay.
Let's take a step back for a second.
So you have a lawsuit based on how somebody felt that it wasn't fair.
Yeah. And it wasn't clear.
Okay.
So
okay.
I, as a seller, am going to pay for my agent and the buyer's agent.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't very clear that that was what was going on because of the co-op compensation. The co-op compensation says I'm paying my listing agent 6%, and they're going to give 3% of that to someone else who then is representing somebody else's interests that are technically possibly adverse to mine. Okay. It's
Okay.
weird. We don't pay for other people's lawyers. We don't pay for other people's things like that, which it just doesn't happen. Okay. But then the argument was, how else is a buyer's agent going to get paid? Okay. It also goes back to the sub-agency. So even before buyer's agents existed, everybody was an agent of the seller. And that's how that payment made sense. The seller, the buyer's agent came and brought the buyer, right?
Okay.
They
Yes.
acted as a sub-agent of the seller because they were assisting in bringing that buyer to the seller. So that's why it made sense that the seller could pay both. But then the buyers didn't have any representation to support their interests. So then they created buyer agency, but they still both get paid by the seller. Quite frankly, back when they created buyer agency, they should have looked at this and figured out, how can we have a buyer get representation and how can they pay for it themselves instead of it being paid by the seller? They didn't do it, so now we're having to figure it out here. What the DOJ wants is they want what they're calling an uncoupling of the commissions. So this 6% to 3% needs to go away. The problem is NAR hasn't changed the rules and the court order doesn't even come out until February. So I've even talked to our local associations that write our forms and said, why can't we change the language? And they said, we're an arm of NAR. We can't do that. Our hands are tied until the court order comes out. It's messy and it exposes you guys in the interim. But what is going to happen, and this is what really needs to be addressed, is the way that it really should read is, I'm the seller. I'm going to pay my listing agent 3%. And then I understand that a buyer has to pay a buyer's agent and that that's an additional cost. If I so choose, I can make a separate offer of compensation to the buyer towards their costs for hiring an agent. But those should be two separate figures. It should be 3% and 2.5% or whatever it's going to be, right? It should be two separate numbers, not the total of this and then part of it goes over here. That's the biggest problem that they're having. And they're saying it wasn't clear because they thought they were paying X% to someone representing their interest. And now they actually are paying part of that to somebody else representing somebody else's interest, and they didn't understand it. So that's one of the biggest problems that really has to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but we expect that's where the DOJ is really going to insist it change. Honestly, I think the DOJ is just sitting in the background waiting for enough of the cases to go so that they get enough information and can come in and make a national rule and blanket statement with NAR to say this is how it needs to be done. But so that's part one of where the problem lies. But then let's talk about buyers. So now I'm a buyer and I want to buy a house. How am I going to afford my agent if it's not already included in the listing, right? So you as a buyer's agent really need to start to talk about how you get paid. We need to talk about commissions nonstop. Talk about how you get paid, talk about who pays for what, talk about who's responsible for what, because that's where the problems came in. So as a buyer's agent, you can get paid a couple of ways, right? And this is how you really should be explaining it. You're going to agree to pay me 3%. There's a couple of different ways that I can get paid that 3%, but you're on the hook for the 3%, Mr. Buyer. I could get paid partly from the seller. There's this thing called cooperative compensation where the seller may defray some of your costs by offering compensation towards my commission. And you'll see that in the listing. Here's where you'll see it in the listing. You'll see exactly how much they're willing to pay towards my commission. So then you're only responsible for the balance. Okay. That's the transparency that needed to happen. That's why that all had to be published We really needed to publish that buyer co-op compensation offer from the very beginning. So you explain this, and then you say, but remember, if we go look at a listing that's offering 0, then you're going to have to come up with that difference. You really need to start explaining this to them so that they can proactively look at what they want to go see, what houses they want to see, what, and what that cost is going to correlate to. So you have this conversation in the beginning, and we've had some people say, they have clients that say, I don't want to see houses that don't cover your full commission. And that's okay. You still can't filter in the MLS by how much is offered in co-op compensation. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think we should change that. I think it just comes down to if someone then picks a house that says 0, but has also said they only want a house where your compensation is covered, then you just remind them, hey, this says 0, so we may have to get a little creative in the negotiating and what we're going to do for how I'm going to get paid my compensation. So that's going to go back to the argument where then buyers aren't going to be able to pay their agents. Where are they going to find the money? How are they going to be able to do this? Surprisingly, the Mortgage Bankers Association is already figuring out and lobbying how to roll it into your loans. Okay? It's happening. All right? They were aware.
Okay.
As soon as the lawsuit came out, and they've been lobbying for a while. My last communication with them said that they think they figured it out, but they don't have it nailed down well enough to where they can tell us what's going to happen yet. But they're working on it. So hopefully we'll be seeing some changes with that soon. The biggest thing I would say now is I think the buyer's agent commission needs to be treated similar to a funding fee. Remember when nobody could afford a funding fee unless it was added on top of the loan? So now VA loans can be more than 100% because you can also include the funding fee. They make changes all the time. We just needed to lobby them to get them to make the changes. So even without that change to let them roll it into the loan, you've also already got closing cost credits that you can get. And that's the other place we see it, right? So if they don't want to offer any commission, you can say, okay, we're going to ask for my commission percent in a closing cost credit. And then that will cover that. The same way we did, when the market was very competitive, but buyers needed closing costs. Okay, we'll offer 3% more and ask for 3% in closing costs. You can still do that to cover your commissions. And that's part of the thing that we need to start to look at is how are we going to make this happen? So with that, though, I don't know what all of those limits are. So I'm going to let Marquita jump in here for a second and tell us what our kind of max limits are on those different loan types, because I can't keep them all straight.
I bet. So first, I want to just say that, thank you for kind of unpacking that and making it a little simple to understand. I am happy to hear that the Mortgage Bankers Association is trying to do something for clients, because the thought process of adding it to the loan amount and asking for the credit back just for the commission does scare me, though, for certain buyers, in particular first-time home buyers who might need that closing cost credit to actually, help with the true closing costs that as we know it right now. Yeah. So, the Mortgage Bankers Association with some type of save and allowing it to be a higher amount, on top of, like you said, financing a funding fee would actually be great, because on VA loans, you can't pay the commission at all. Far as, sellers, a commission can't do it. And, that was the first thing that popped into my head, because of course I love VA loans. So let me see if I can share what I have here for you to take a look at. See, can y'all see that? Maybe need to make it a little bigger. That's not necessarily the slide to do it. Let's see if I can just make it be the full screen. So at the end of the day, the problem I have with this is that we're limited on, how much seller help can go where. So if we start having this money go towards commission, it takes away from the money. So again, I think, it's a L for buyers when you start talking about that. And yes, doesn't allow real estate commissions to be paid at all. So hopefully we can come to some type of happy medium. But from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying right now, I mean, things will absolutely change. It's just
Marquita, I don't think they can see the slide. It's black.
oh no, so it's black. Okay, let's see. How about now? No, it's black. Okay, well, I will see if I can get it to share now.
Okay.
Stop sharing, and let's see. Share screen. Got it. How about now? No.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
All right. Thank you. All right. So that popped up and wanted you all to be able to try to at least get a look at that. I will upload this cheat sheet into the group file so you all have it on what the maximum concessions are. But as you can see, we're pretty limited for the most part. I mean, right now, the best loan type for something like this would be FHA because maybe you could add 3% seller, helping with for the commission, and then another 3% to actually pay the closing costs as we know them. Right. So this one would be actually winning as well as USDA, but I think we'll have some situations everywhere else. I mean, even with conventional loans, you would need a bigger down payment to get to the max of the 6%. So some combination of thereof actually rolling into the closing costs could still be challenging, for buyers. And in particular, I would say first-time buyers and veterans, which is something that's near and dear to me. So that is just something that I keep thinking about it through. Now, somebody may be selling their home and actually has money and can pay these commissions and are able to do it. I don't think that they will be as, impacted by what is actually happening. And one thing I wanted to just add back in there that I heard from you is that the buyers didn't know, but I've actually seen this, that I've seen agents say that you don't worry, you're not paying my commission to buyers. Like I've seen it either advertised or a buyer said,
buyers agents are free.
Yeah,
don't
so we probably should don't say that anymore, right?
You can't, you can't. You're getting paid one way or another. And that's the biggest thing is we've got to make it more transparent. How do I get paid? I'm going to get paid one way or another. It might be this way, but if not, then it's still your responsibility to pay the difference or something, and that's where it comes in. They're upset that we were relying so much on the MLS and what was in there for you guys to get your compensation. They said, no, a buyer should be able to negotiate too, what they're willing to pay. And that lack of the ability to negotiate is what created the antitrust problem, which they argue has created the standard commissions. Okay.
Got it.
So that's where all of that comes from. The biggest thing I'm going to tell you that you guys need to do is talk about it. You need to really understand it, and you really need to talk about it. The clearer you can be, the better this is going to go. Because similar to, I think we had this call previously, when Zillow came out and everybody said, well, Zillow says my home is worth X. The answer is not, well, Zillow sucks. Okay, that's not the answer. We're all
but they do, Nicole.
I know. But listen, me as a consumer, not as somebody in the business, is going to say, but they're on TV. They have a reputation. I've heard of them. I know enough that they're a big company that will be responsible, as responsible as I can hold them. But you're not explaining to me why I shouldn't trust them. You're just saying that they suck. It sounds like you just don't like a competitor. The biggest thing you need to do is acknowledge the problem and validate their feelings and then explain why it doesn't apply here. So like we did with Zillow, right? We said, okay, remember that little tiny disclosure at the bottom that said there's a 5% margin of error in all areas? We said, okay, Zillow's a national company. This is where their data is coming from. This is how this is happening, but there's this 5% margin of error. This is why you need to hire me. I will work with what you see and I'll explain to you why it is or isn't accurate.
Which
But
5% is a lot in this area, right?
What?
It's a lot, right? 5% in our area?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's huge. It is. And I mean, and it makes sense as to why Zillow isn't accurate. But instead of just saying, well, they suck, they don't know what they're doing, that would make me question as a consumer, but why? Can you tell me why? Give me some detail. Same thing here, right? There's a New York Times article that says there was some shady stuff going on in real estate commissions. There was some stuff happening that shouldn't have been happening. You need to tell them, yes, this is a valid thing. There are some problems. I'm not one of the agents who behaved this way and just relied on getting paid by whatever was in the MLS. Let me explain to you how I get paid, how this happens, and what the lawsuit was all about. Don't just brush it under the rug. Acknowledge that it was an issue, validate your client's concern, and then explain everything to them. Answer their questions. Be ready for them. Really be able to flesh out how that works and what happened and why it doesn't apply to you representing that client.
Well, I would have to 100% agree. It's like when the elephant's in the room, you can't come in the room and be like, how's the weather?
Right.
Right? You need to address the elephant. So I'm saying, and this is just my opinion, that I think it will be the forefront of my talk right away and just get it out the way.
Yeah.
Right. I would have this talk very much up front.
Yeah.
Even if, they're not wholeheartedly aware. I think, the New York Times, the national media has brought attention to this now. So I would come right out the gate explaining and being able to have a serious value proposition, based on that. So, I think I would address the pink elephant that's sitting there and not talk about the weather.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not going to win on appeal. I mean, that's the other one I get a lot of is, well, there's a lot of appeals, there's this, and they're going to do these things, and we think they're going to be successful. Their argument on appeal is based on what they call a per se versus rule of reason. So what the judge did, remember, it was 9 people that made this decision, but the judge has to affirm it and really directed them into what they wanted them to consider. Okay. So the co-op compensation rule was presented, and the judge said, we have 2 ways that you can find that this was unreasonable or unfair to consumers.
Okay.
There's one way that's called the per se way, which says on its face, as it reads, this is unfair. And then there's the rule of reason. And the rule of reason says it might not be unfair on its face, but the way it was applied was unfair or an antitrust violation. The judge forced them to use a per se rule. That's harder to prove than a rule of reason violation. Rule of reason is if that didn't work, then you can find it this way. They found that this rule was on its face bad. They're not going to make an argument that says the rule of reason should have been applied because they would have lost there anyway. So I don't remember exactly where that came from, that was going to be their appeal argument, but I don't think it's going to go well.
Wow.
Regardless, the DOJ is aware, consumers are aware, everybody wants answers, and they want to understand why it's fair and what your value is. So the biggest thing you have to do is start talking about why you're worth whatever you're charging your client. And that's where a lot of people sort of slacked a little and just said, well, this is what I charge. Well, consumers are now going to say, well, why is that what you charge? Explain it to me. What do I get from that? Also, I think you're going to see a lot of variable commissions now. It's not here yet, but I think the next argument is going to be, why does it need to be a percentage of the sales price? Why do you need an extra $27,000 to sell my $1 million house compared to my $100,000 lot? I'm not saying that it's not more expensive and that there isn't more to be done, but is it worth $27,000? I don't know. And a consumer is really going to want to know. It may actually be good because on your lower priced homes, you may be able to charge more. It may be something where, really, I think you're going to be more like lawyers where you can say, this client is a pain in the butt. I'm going to spend way more time with them, so I'm going to charge them more. And I think you're going to see a lot more adjustments and changes and flexibility with that. And that's just where it's going to go. But you really have to figure out, why am I worth exactly what I'm asking for from these people? The other thing, like I said, break down how you get paid for the buyers. Here's how this works. Here's what you'll see in the listing. Here's how much they're offering towards my compensation. And then you're responsible for the rest. Now, the other question that's come up a lot is from the listing side. How do you convince a seller that they should still offer compensation to a buyer's agent? Because now they're going, well, I don't have to, and you just used to force me, and I don't want to, right? And everybody said, well, now what? Are listing agents going to write contracts? Or lawyers going to write contracts? I don't want to write that contract. I will if I have to, but you guys can see the house, and we would much, be better if you did it. But they need, the other argument was that it's easier if they're both represented, right? But sellers also don't want to offer 2.5% or 3% or whatever it is to any agent on the other side. I mean, how many times have you dealt with an agent that doesn't do their job? Why did they get the same amount as somebody who's really making the transaction work, right? But in terms of getting a seller to offer co-op compensation, the biggest rule you have to remember is where the incentive lies. So the lawsuit made it very clear that we can talk about commissions and we can talk about how a co-op compensation offer creates more traffic to your house. You're going to have more buyers coming through your house if you're offering to defray their costs for their agent. Here's the most important part. That incentive is for the buyer only. Do not ever say you need to offer to pay a buyer's agent because the buyer's agents won't show your house unless you pay for it. That's the ethics violation that we're all aware of. Okay.
Can you say that again? So
yeah.
You say, don't ever say
the buyer's agent offer of compensation is an incentive to get buyer's agents to show your house. No, it's an incentive to the buyer directly for them to want to come see your house because their costs are defrayed. The incentive is to the buyer directly, not to the agents, because that's the ethics violation, is if the agent only shows X, Y, Z. It shouldn't matter. You should be having the conversation about the excess cost. So that's one of the bigger things there. Again, buyer's agent, don't call yourself free. I actually think that's where NAR also kind of shot themselves in the foot. I mean, they had actual guidance as to you're allowed to say you're free as long as there's a disclosure and disclaimer and all these little things down there. It was a problem. So you're not free. You get paid in there's a lot of different ways you can get paid. Some of it can come from the seller's offer of compensation. Also, it can be something that we talk about with the different loan types, rolling it in there. The other thing that's come up is, remember, the commissions through your listing and buyer agency agreement are between you and your client. The ethics rules specifically say once you put in that buyer co-op offer, right, then you write an offer and ratify the contract. That amount that's offered to the buyer's agent from the seller can't be changed. Okay? That's the big rule, because everybody's now talking about how do we negotiate the commissions in the contract between the buyer and seller? And everybody's afraid to do it because of the ethics rules. There are ways that you can do it, but there are some very specific things you have to keep in mind. Remember, this is between the buyer and the seller, not the agents. The ethics violation is if you ask the listing agent to change their commission out of the total so that you get compensated more. Okay, you can't change that once it's ratified. But what you can do is if you've got a buyer who says, I love this house, I want this house, but I can't pay your commission, I need it rolled into the house, and they're only offering 0. They won't pay your commission based on the listing. You can make an offer to the seller and you can put in those other terms, seller to pay X% towards buyer's agent's commission. Now, the reason you're allowed to do that is because, again, you're defraying a cost for the buyer. It's like a closing cost credit, but it's between the buyer and the seller and not the agents negotiating directly with each other or involving either of their commissions. Okay. I would think you would kind of expect, depending on the market, right? Okay, I'm going to increase, if I'm charging my client 2% and I need the seller to cover that 2%, maybe I increase the sales price by 2% and put this line in other terms. Seller to pay 2% of sales price to buyer's agents, towards buyer's agent's commission. And it's not paying to the buyer's agent, pay towards the buyer's agent's commission, because remember, we're defraying a cost for the buyer.
So being very specific is what I hear you saying.
The language and how we're handling this is to be very specific. And we, I'll review it for you. We'll look at it, when everything happens. This is, how we all kind of filter and go through it. But we're happy to look at the language for you, make sure you're covering yourself, right? Because the biggest thing is we want to make sure you're protected. You need to stay safe in all of this. And we don't have any guidance until the order comes out. And even when it does, it's still going to be a little bit before they figure out exactly how that's going to go. But that's the other way that you can work that in there. And I think those agents that are buyer's agents that really flesh out how they get paid and can get creative with it, you're going to get your clients the house that other agents couldn't get. Because they said, well, it's 0, so you're going to have to pay me out of pocket. So do you really want to go see it? Okay. I mean, that could have been the one. And you could have figured out how to work that out by getting creative with it. But everybody is so afraid to talk about commissions because of what we've talked about for so long that they don't know where to go. I mean, somebody asked NVAR if they would put out videos advising, how to do this. And they said, no. You know why? They don't want to be on the hook for that either. It's a liability thing. Everybody's nervous, but it's really not that scary as long as you focus on being transparent and doing the best for the consumer. Okay. The other big issue that I think is going to come up, and nobody likes me for this. Everybody's actually, I've gotten mixed reviews about it, but I think you're going to see some changes to how buyer's agents get paid too.
Well, that's very interesting that you say that. We have a question that popped in respect to buyer's agent and paid. If you can see that question in the comments. Can you see the comments here?
Yeah, third party approved sale. Is that the reason? So I think
currently living through this change now.
Yeah, I think
which
so.
kind of led you right in. We thank you for your comment.
Yeah. Now it could be third party approved sale because it could be a short sale, and that may be all that they're offering towards that compensation.
Okay.
That could be the case, but I think it's just going to be different. I don't think we're going to have a standard commission that we've seen. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think people are going to have to get more creative. I see people going to, well, this is what I charge for this specifically, this amount. But if you want a social media package, here's the add-on. Here's the this. I mean, you're going to get creative. It's similar to how, all lawyers used to bill hourly.
Wow.
They don't do that anymore. Now we have flat fees, we have things, everything is on the table because that's what's best for consumers. And we need to be able to compete with each other to stay, within a price that makes sense for them. So I think it's just going to be a huge shift, and we're going to see a lot of variations with what's going to happen. But transparency is really the primary thing. With buyers, the other thing I think we're going to have a problem with is previously the buyer's agency agreement said, I'm going to pay you X% or what's in the MLS, whichever is higher. Now, let me walk you through this situation. Marquita, you're my buyer's agent, and I'm buying a house with you, okay? I negotiated and I got you to agree that you were going to find me a house and I was going to pay you 1.5%. Okay. Well, I found this house over here, but it's offering the buyer's agent 2.5%. We get to the table and I see, the 2.5% is there. And I go, I only agreed to pay you 1.5%. Why is the seller paying you more?
Oh, wow.
I want to know where that other 1% came from, why it's going to you. Why am I paying you more than I agreed to pay you by it being rolled into the price of the house? Now, this is where this is going to matter, because the lawsuit for the buyer suing NAR and everybody else was originally dismissed. Yeah, it was originally dismissed because they said you're not in contract with them. The seller is the one that pays the commission, so the buyers were not damaged. Well, since this lawsuit came out and we see how this works, they're going to restructure the entire complaint and say, no, I'm damaged because the price of my house is higher because the seller decided what I was going to pay my agent, and I didn't get to negotiate that down because this is the way the form reads.
Wow.
So I think we're going to really have to stick to what you put in there is going to be the amount that you're actually going to get paid.
Okay.
Or the other thing that I would tell you and I would advise you is go high. Always go high on the agreement, because if I agreed to pay Marquita 3%, but only 2.5% is offered in the listing, and she says, it's okay, I'll waive the other half, I'm not upset about that. That's helpful to consumers. That's helping keep costs down. You will be more protected as long as you start high and agree to bring it down. And you don't have to agree to bring it down. You can say, well, we talked about this and you owe the extra X%. But making the argument that I agreed to do it for 1.5%, but I should keep the 2.5% is really going to be a massive problem later on. I think it's more state specific. I think they're going to look at the agencies that are doing your forms and they're going to say, why isn't there an option that says you'll rebate it back to the buyer? Why isn't it coming back? And this question came up because someone said, do you think rebating is going to go away? And I said, no, I think it's going to get worse. And this is why. They're going to have a better understanding of how agents get paid, and they're going to expect to pay what they agreed to pay and not any more. But I think it's local. I think it's going to be state specific, and it's what the Consumer Protection Agency generally calls an unfair and deceptive trade practice. And I think because there's no box in there that says it can rebate or go back or how it can be done, I think it's going to be a problem. The same way in the post-occupancy agreement, right? It says the buyer will or will not refund any unused rent. You have an option there. You need an option in your buyer agency agreement that says I will or will not refund any excess that the seller is offering towards my commission. And they're not doing that. And we brought it up to enough people, and it's still apparently getting voted down. But remember, you as individual agents are very insulated. The lawsuits are being filed against the brokerages because your broker has to approve your terms, okay? Their contract is with your broker, not with you individually. So you only have so much control over all of this. But if your broker is not changing the form or if your broker is requiring a minimum compensation, we should really talk, because it's not, that's where we're going to run into problems. The biggest problem is going to be that nobody should be requiring a specific amount to be offered to the buyer's agent when you're on the listing side.
Mhm.
If there's a minimum that I'm going to charge my clients,
Mhm.
that makes a little more sense, right? They're covering your E&O, they're on the hook for all of these other expenses and liabilities. So that minimum makes a little more sense. Do I think it's 2.5%? No, I think it should be a flat fee, and I think it should be per transaction and more specific like that, because those don't really shift based on the sales price. But requiring a minimum to be offered to the other side is going to flat out blanket get you in trouble right now.
It
And
kind of goes back to what started it all, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that really needs to go away. We have to hold our associations and NAR responsible. That's how we got here too, right? Clarity and transparency and really understanding how this is going is the key to making sure that you guys are protected. Understand it, explain it to your clients, break it all down. If you have questions about how to explain it to them and how to keep yourself safe, ask us, reach out. We're happy to walk you through it. I've torn it apart enough times. We'll make sure you're okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. So it looks like we have a couple of questions that I will bring up onto the screen from one of the participants. Bruce, we appreciate your questions and excellent job kind of explaining it and breaking it down. I know I had a somewhat of an understanding, but I kind of missed it on, how the antitrust starts per se. And it just sounds to me like that, yes, definitely things are going to change. But the biggest part that I think you harped on quite a bit was transparency. And that is going to be paramount. This actually reminds me of when the mortgage industry changed after we were blamed for the housing crash that we did absolutely cause. That if we were charging a rate that was higher than market to a borrower before, if there was overage being paid, the lender could just keep it and that was that. But now you have to rebate that back to the actual buyer or borrower as a lender credit. So I can definitely see that, you know, happening, and like you said, rebating happening a little more. I got excited. Like you agreed 1.5, they're paying 2.5. I thought I had a 1% bonus, but maybe not. So here's a question here from Bruce. Based on the example, typically our contract documents include VBA is uploaded with brokerage. So if a 3% compensation is signed and agreed by all parties, that 3% is enforceable. Will a VBA addendum need to draft and ratify reducing the compensation?
So I would advise to do that addendum. There's a couple things. The way we've been doing it now, right? We had a title company. We don't really get a copy of your buyer broker agreement and your listing agreement. We ask you what the commission is and you tell us. Now, if there's something that says, 2.5 and then something that says 3, then we ask for it so we can clarify.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're deviating from what's in that agreement, we ask for a broker letter, right? Because again, they're contracting with the broker. So if you're dropping it down and your agreement says 3%, I want to know that your broker said it was okay to go 2.5, because now I have that agreement. I think you should definitely always make sure you're getting it approved by your broker to drop that down. If they have a policy that you can just do it, that's fine. Liability wise, your client's not going to come after you for you charging less. They're just not going to do it. Your broker may come in and say, I didn't approve this, and so now I expect to be compensated that. So I would get just something from your broker that says the drop was permissible, or even just a copy of their written policy that says you have the authority to drop it yourself, without approval from them. Because I think the other thing from the lawsuit too is that we've learned a lot of agents are just sending DocuSign and not explaining it. And the people that are on the hook for that now are these brokers. I think your brokers are going to really start to watch what you're doing and start making sure you're following their policies. I think it's going to be an internal sort of pull eventually to say, well, you didn't follow what I told you needed to do, so we're not responsible for this. And I think it could get really ugly.
Okay. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you again, Nicole, for this information and bringing some clarity, and hope everyone has walked away a little more confident about how to proceed in this market as we move forward. And I put up across the screen a few times, CYA, yes, cover your butts out there. I think that'll be the bottom line, and being transparent seems like that's going to be the way to go. So, Nicole, how can they reach out to you? I know we're in the group, so everybody should have that. But if you're seeing the stream on YouTube, then can we go ahead and drop some contact information and we'll call it a day?
And there we go. Awesome. It's telling me it failed to go in. Can you put my email and cell phone?
Absolutely, I can. You're very welcome. Thanks for coming out. So I will put that on here now. So what is your phone number, Nicole, that we want to use here?
602 621 1956.
And your email is
nmarucci@fgte.com.
I should know this already by heart.
I know, that's okay. I asked you the other day what your email address was.
fgte.com. Yeah, I should know it by heart, but this 50-year-old brain does not allow me to remember a lot of things, I promise you.
Yeah.
It's very limited in scope.
I do see one other question about putting up to 3%.
Okay, yeah, we can jump back over there. But guys, if you want to screenshot that or come back through the live screen, make sure you get with Nicole Marucci at fgte.com. All right.
Thanks. Yeah. So, and I've had that question come up before. It says, what about putting in that blank, up to 3% or up to X%? Remember, then you're leaving it blank, right? You're saying, well, if they put 0, I'll take 0 up to 3%. So I would stick with a specific amount and just have that conversation with your buyer that says, look, I understand, and we can negotiate between you and I later. We'll work through this, but generally this is what I charge and this is what you're agreeing to, or whatever amount it is. But if you go high, then if you drop it down, they're going to be a lot happier than if you make more on it. So yeah, I would stick to a specific number. And I mean, it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be 3%. It can be 2.5%. Could be 2. I mean, it's whatever you want. But making sure that it is either more than whatever's in the MLS or equal to is going to keep you safer, or rebating back that overage. I can give you language to do that too.
All right, and in response, we have this should be exact from a broker standpoint. Thank you, Opal, for that acknowledgement. So keep it exact, no more up to, huh?
Yeah. And not per MLS. No more per MLS.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, folks. Well, you all have a great afternoon. Reach out to Nicole with more questions. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time sharing. Just another way to give back and bring some value. And hey, you nailed it. All right. We'll see y'all.